Hello and welcome to Pick Yourself, the podcast that helps you build and grow your electronic music career. You will learn the strategies, mindset, tactics, and tools that you can implement today to break through tomorrow. My name is Philip. Now let's get right into today's episode. Hello, nice to have you here again with me for the Pick Yourself podcast. And this week's episode is something very important because we are going to talk about clever investments. Now, obviously, I don't mean stocks and bonds or something like that. I mean how to invest in your music career the right way. So by the end of this episode, you will know exactly what to do in order to gain the maximum returns on your investment of time and money in your career. So first of all, I'm going to show you the 3 biggest mistakes that I see upcoming artists make when it comes to investments. And then I'm going to walk you through my favorite growth strategy with the highest return on investment. But why is it even that important to talk about investments? Well, the problem is that we're usually facing very limited resources as an upcoming artist. And these resources are usually time, money, or a combination of both. And we have to think very strategically on how to invest our time and money in order to gain the maximum returns for our music career. So let me ask you a question. Have you ever sat down and clearly analyzed in which areas of your career you're spending how much money and time? Well, the answer is probably no, and that's very normal, that's very common. But this is also where the trouble begins, because we're investing subconsciously in areas that give us short-term satisfaction instead of long-term benefits. Let me repeat this. Short-term satisfaction instead of long-term benefits. We tend to procrastinate on the things that are really important, that bring us forward, because they're really hard to do. We spend money on gadgets that make us look like we're accomplishing something. That can be a very, very nice looking Instagram post when we're playing with our latest little analog toy. But honestly, this is probably not where your money and time is spent most efficiently. So let me walk you through the 3 biggest mistakes that I see artists make these days in terms of investment. So investment mistake number 1, and you will hate it, I promise. It's expensive gear that doesn't make a difference. And yes, I'm slaughtering some sacred cows here, but let me get one thing straight. I absolutely love gear. So from high-end studio monitors to analog synthesizers and the latest flashy special Eurorack module, I love this stuff just like everybody else. But do I think they make a difference in your career? Well, not really. So your gear obsession is probably more of a problem than a solution to your status at the moment. But why is gear so problematic? Well, in my opinion, the biggest problem with equipment is that we tend to blame our lack of skills or experience on a piece of gear that we don't own yet. And we've probably seen some famous artists use especially that certain instrument that we're obsessing about at the moment. And that makes us think, well, if we just had this one thing, then it would help us. If we only had a real vintage 909, then I could create the perfect kick for my tunes and finally make them cut through the mix. But trust me, I will for sure come up with 100 better reasons why your kick drum does not cut through the mix, and it won't have anything to do with whether you own a 909 or not. So I'm absolutely convinced that if you can't write amazing music with just the stock plugins of your DAW, be it Ableton, Cubase, Logic, Fruity Loops, whatever it is. If that's not possible for you, then please don't blame it on the equipment. It's just a lack of skills. And that's also okay, because this is something that you can change pretty easily. And even if your main argument is the tactile feel of the real knobs and so on, and that you just can change things on the fly while recording, yeah, I get it, that makes sense in some way, but you can also mimic that feeling with MIDI controllers. So these days, that's not a major issue. And yeah, some things sound very special, and it's definitely, like, there is a real reason to buy analog hardware. I get it, yes. And I also own analog hardware, so it's not that I I'm a complete opponent of that. But I think you have to earn it. And yes, when you are the cream of the crop and you're releasing on some of the best respected labels and your tunes are getting played constantly in the important clubs and festivals, you get great gigs and so on, yeah, maybe then analog hardware is the next step you can take. But before that, well, I'm convinced that there are a lot of things that you should invest in to actually earn your way up the ladder. But let's say now you put in a lot of time to build skills and actually get something very, very good out of your stock plugins in the DAW. And you only want to expand your sound now. You want to go into a little bit of a different direction and explore new sonic territories. Then sometimes it can make sense to invest into new equipment in a way. But it doesn't have to be a $2,000+ synthesizer in hardware form. I actually think that there are so many amazing software synths out there, so I think there's just not a real need to invest that much money into real hardware. Just to give you some examples, the Monarch synth by Native Instruments has blown me away sonically. It's such a great tool and it's very affordable. It is very analog sounding in my opinion. And there are many other things like the Tal Juno 106 is a very good emulation of the real Roland hardware. And even if you look at the Eurorec world, the modular synthesizers, even in that realm, the digital developers are gaining ground very, very fast. So the stuff sounds amazing already, and it's just a question of time until most of the modules are digitally available in some way, shape, or form. So do I think there is a difference between the real hardware thing and the digital thing? Yes, I do. I do think that instruments have a soul, a heart, and even if it's in strict A/B tests sometimes hard to hear the difference, I still believe that you create a little bit differently with these analog tools. And that's a nice way, it's a nice production workflow, and I completely get it. But do I think it's the most important investment you should make right now? No. Absolutely not. And this is the point that I want to get across. You don't have to invest in these tools in order to be more successful in your music career. And even if you feel the need to experiment with these tools, to try them out, to record something, get some takes down, well, please just rent out a studio that owns them for a day and get as many tracks down as possible, or rent them from friends, or from equipment rental companies. Whatever you can do, this is probably a better thing to do at this stage in your career. And I think that wraps up our first investment mistake, which was investing in expensive gear that does not make a difference. So let's move on to the next one. Investment mistake number 2 is spending too much time on social media. Now, I don't want to sound like your parents, but I definitely believe that social media is one of the biggest productivity killers in our society overall. And at the same time, it's a bit of a problem because you as an artist, you need to work with these channels. You need to appear there. It's barely possible these days to completely neglect them. But the real question here is, how much time are you spending really curating your channels versus how much time are you spending randomly scrolling through your newsfeed? And I think we all know the answer to this, unless you're one of the few Jedis who manage to naturally stay away from that. We usually get sucked in pretty easily and we tend to forget about everything. We stay there 30 minutes, 1 hour, actually not really doing anything except observing what other people do, what other artists do, maybe counting our own likes and new followers for the 20th time this day. And that does not really help us. The problem is it can even feel a little bit like we're doing something productive. Because, we're tracking our progress on social media, we're watching our growth. This is what we probably tell ourselves. We have a close eye on our audience and so on. But that's not true. That's just us lying to ourselves and still wasting time. And the same goes for Netflix and Amazon Prime or whatever you use, whatever kind of streaming platform for movies you use. That is not so much different from social media, except that we actually don't have any excuse why we waste time there. Whereas with social media, we still have the excuse that we're just watching our artist channel and curate it and so on. And there's one underlying concept that is very helpful and very important to know about here. And that's the concept of opportunity cost. You might have heard of that already. So for those of you who don't know, opportunity cost is defined as the loss of other alternatives when one alternative is chosen. So what does that mean? Let's just say you've invested 1 hour in Instagram and you checked out your new followers, you checked their profiles, you follow them, you like some posts, then you follow some hashtags and see what happens there. Yeah, and time goes by and 60 minutes are gone. Well, the opportunity cost is basically everything else you could have done in those 60 minutes. That could have started working on your next EP, invested the time in producing music. You could have come up with a new strategy on how to get more gigs. You could have updated your artist bio. You could have met with that other artist producer who you wanted to collaborate with. You could have watched an online tutorial for that certain skill that you're lacking. Let's say that's advanced beat production, and so on. You get the idea. Now, obviously, we cannot be productive 24/7. That's bullshit. And I'm absolutely a big proponent of having some recreation time besides the things where you have to put in a lot of energy. And that's very important as well. But even then you pay a heavy opportunity cost. When you're scrolling through your Instagram feed for 60 minutes, you could have spent that time with your partner, with your friends, actually engaging in real life. And I'm not free of this. I'm guilty as well. But I'm very aware of the problem. So I take a lot of action on this to try to get away from it even more and to be more productive, but also have a more healthy private life at the same time. Now, this is not an episode on productivity. I will do one specifically on that topic, but I will still share some short tips that can help you and tools that you can use. So the first tool I'm going to suggest is installing the Facebook Newsfeed Eradicator. And that's a browser plugin that basically, just as the name says, it deletes the Facebook newsfeed out of your Facebook screen. Yeah. And that's amazing because you cannot get drawn in as easily. You can still access messages and so on. You can still post on your own profiles and pages, but it replaces the bullshit in the middle. And that helps a lot when you actually only want to work there, but not scroll randomly through the newsfeed. The second tool that I'm suggesting to you and that I'm using quite heavily is called the Cold Turkey Blocker. And that's a free app you can install on your machines that lets you enter a list of distractive sites, and you can set a timer, and then it will block you from accessing these sites during that time. And that's amazing because if I have to focus pretty heavily, for example, for recording this podcast, that's a very, very difficult task to do, then I'm setting the Cold Turkey Blocker to block me away from the distractions for 1 hour, 2 hours, whatever I need. Then I put my phone into flight mode, put it away somewhere in a backpack or whatever so I don't see it. And then it just feels like pure freedom. I can finally focus completely 100% on the thing that I'm doing right now. And since time is such a valuable resource, probably even more valuable than money, overall in life for sure, but especially when building your career, then it makes sense to protect your most productive and most energetic times in the day by using these kinds of tools to help you stay away from social media distraction. And in your free time, you can do whatever you want, obviously. You can spend your time on social media for the rest of the day, that's fine. Or watch Netflix until you fall asleep. But it's very important to protect your most productive time during the day. And these little tools can help you protect that asset. And that's it for our second investment mistake, spending too much time on social media. So let's move on to the third and final investment mistake that I see upcoming artists make these days. And that is paying for a vinyl release without having a solid fan base. Ooh, I feel it hurt. You're probably a vinyl lover, and maybe all your friends are vinyl lovers, and you think that having a vinyl release under your belt gives you a lot of credibility in the scene. You might even sell some copies on your Bandcamp page if your music is really, really good. But the problem is, imagine what else you could do with the money you've spent on the other 279 vinyl records that you just didn't sell. Now, a short disclaimer here. I am talking about people who actually want to build and grow their career now. Now, if you're someone who just does music as a hobby and you want to have a vinyl release for personal fulfillment, then that's a perfectly fine reason and that's okay. I'm not messing with you. That's absolutely okay. But if somebody wants to build and grow his or her career in electronic music, then I'm very convinced that you could do something better with the money and also the time, because organizing a vinyl release not only costs money, it's also quite a heavy project management task. So I personally love vinyl as a medium, and I believe it's here to stay for at least the next couple of years. I don't think it will vanish or go out of fashion quite soon. But if you want my advice on how to invest in your music career, I strongly suggest that you stick with digital releases for now, until your fan base is big enough to justify the expense of producing a vinyl release. And that applies to other physical products as well. It's not just vinyl, it's also CDs, it's also sticks with your music, it is t-shirts and fanny packs, coffee mugs, whatever merchandise you have in your head right now. Only if you know that you at least sell enough to cover the expenses, then it's worth thinking about that. Apart from that, I'm a strong believer that you should invest your money into growing your career instead of producing physical products that no one will buy and that just live in your shelf. And that wraps it up for investment mistake number 3, which was paying for a vinyl release without having a solid fan base. So since I have shared with you the 3 biggest investment mistakes that I see upcoming artists make, I think it's now time to talk about how to invest in your music career for maximum returns. So what should you do in order to gain maximum returns and have the maximum growth in your career? And in my opinion, there are basically 3 areas that will give you those maximum returns on investment. And that is skills, mindset, and specialist outsourcing. And if you've listened to the very first episode, the intro episode of this podcast, then this shouldn't come as a surprise, because skills, mindset, and specialist outsourcing, all 3 areas help you gain long-term success instead of small but instant rewards. And this podcast focuses on this type of long-term benefits. So let's talk about each of these areas. So why should you invest in building and growing your skills? Well, you're probably very talented at creating music, and maybe your production chops are far above average, but still I bet there are enough blind spots and areas in which you could improve, even on the creative side of things. So, have you mastered every single form of synthesis? Do you know what generative music is? Do you have an idea what to do with field recordings and how to mash them up, your self-recorded samples? Maybe you have no idea what modal interchange is and how that works. And what about sequencing your own polyrhythms, things like that? So there are enough areas in which every one of us can improve. It's a little bit different for everybody, but I'm sure if we adopt that constant learner mentality, then there's a lot of skills that might actually help us create better music. And apart from the music-related skills, there's a lot of other stuff that we can improve on and that might help us build and grow our career. So for example, task organization, goal setting, maybe even copywriting, project management stuff. And I know that sounds weird at first, but if you're mostly a DIY artist doing everything on your own and trying to break through, there are so many skills besides music that help you overcome obstacles on your path. But don't get me wrong here, I'm convinced that the music creation aspect is the absolutely most important thing in your career. Because if that product is shit, then nothing will help you, no project management, marketing whatsoever. So definitely put most skill building and effort into the core thing that makes up you as an artist. But don't forget about the other aspects. And if you want to invest in your music career the right way, I suggest you set aside a yearly budget of money and time for acquiring and improving crucial skills. And to give you some examples of how to invest in things, you could, for example, get one-on-one consultations on specific skills and issues. So this is something that I do regularly with people, that they just hire me for a one-on-one consultation to help them with a certain production struggle that they have, or maybe even something career-related that they want to talk about. Apart from that, there are small group masterclasses. There is something like part-time university courses, or even full-time ones, specialized online courses that you can take, and even watching free tutorials, but very proactively on things where you want to improve on. That is something that you can do that helps you build certain skills. Do you want to know my dirty little secret? I'm investing as much as $1,500 or even euros into growing skills every single year. So I'm taking courses, I'm investing in one-on-one coaching if I need it. All these things are very important. I never think that I'm already there. And my overall goal is to be able to invest even more, simply because I've experienced that growth, that multiplication of the time and money that I put in there. I see the results, and this is why I'm very confident in suggesting this to you now. So this was the first aspect, investing in your skills. And now the second one is invest in your mindset. Now that sounds a little bit abstract, so what do I mean by investing in your mindset? So I'm very convinced that if you have the right beliefs and convictions, then you basically have an easier time maneuvering through your different good and bad experiences in your career. I think it helps you overcome obstacles more easily if you adopt certain types of mindsets. And since mindset has a lot to do with character and personality, let's do a little experiment. I'm going to ask you a few questions. So the first one is, how do you deal with failure currently? Do you sometimes have a feeling of inadequacy? Are you punishing yourself for not being productive enough? Do you often find yourself being jealous of other people's success? Do you think you deserve more attention than what you're getting right now? Or let's go into the complete opposite direction. Do you think the world owes you something and simply doesn't recognize your ingenuity? Do you think you're better than all your peers and deserve more success? Are you not sharing your knowledge because you want to protect it? So all of these questions have to do with mindset in one way or another. And the better we know ourselves and adopt a healthy perspective towards certain issues, the better we deal with obstacles. So if you invest time and money into this aspect of your career, or even in your personality, if I'm honest with you, you will gradually unlock some kind of superpowers. So how do you do this now in reality? One way to go about this is to read loads of music biographies. Because I think biographies of well-known, respected, and usually relatively old artists right now, they share a lot of wisdom that we can learn from. You can invest in self-help books, and I know that sounds silly, but just go there into the self-help section of your local bookstore or just look for it online and find something that resonates with you, because you instantly feel that there's something in there where you probably need to integrate that into your life. If you really want to get serious, then just get a one-on-one coach to work on certain aspects where you know you should tackle them right now, or you have a little bit awkward perspective on certain issues. And a very easy and cheap way, because it costs nothing, to work on your mindset is you start journaling. At least 5 minutes every day, which is quite easy. That helps you gain awareness for what you need to work on or what things are revolving in your head. Now, the problem with mindset is that it sounds very abstract, and some people shy away from this immediately because of that abstractness. But nevertheless, I don't know any successful, serious artist that hasn't put effort into this. So if you're not willing to invest at least some time into this aspect, you're probably paving the way for massive failure, because you will get overrun by the obstacles you run into. You will not be able to deal with failure in a healthy way. And yeah, the mindset thing is big. And sometimes investing in your music career does not necessarily involve obvious, superficial things. Sometimes it's just that subconscious aspect and these mindset things that really make a difference in the long run. So that's it for the second aspect, which was invest in your mindset. And now let's come to the third and last one, and that is invest in specialist outsourcing. Now, you might already be familiar with this a little bit if you've listened to the last episode, but I still want to stress this again because it's just so crucial. There are a lot of things you can do on your own DIY style, but sometimes you're just running into roadblocks that you need to resolve with external help. And the good thing is, you don't only get professional help and a ready-made solution, but you're usually also learning from these specialists at the same time while you're hiring them. So for example, when artists hire me for mixing and mastering, they always get an in-depth feedback on their production, and I'm also very happy to share everything I know if they have questions and want to know how to implement reverb in a more creative way, how to work with EQ in a way that doesn't damage the source, how to implement compression, if they should even use it in that material or not, and so on, all these questions. And just to give you an example from my personal experience, so one time I've hired a music lawyer for a very tricky contract situation. And not only did she provide me with a great solution for that tricky situation, but I've also learned so much more about the music business in 1 hour than I had learned in several years. So it's amazing how much such help from specialists how much that can do with your overall understanding of things. So here are some things that you can outsource to specialists. Obviously, studio work, mixing, mastering, additional production, and so on. But also design, music videos, photo shoots, legal advice, taxes, accounting, PR and blog relations, and so on. So that's basically stuff that we've already covered in the last episode a little bit. And there's also a very nice side effect to this. And that is, people will notice that you're playing in a different league of professionalism just because you know why and how and what to outsource in your career. That will give you an overall more professional appeal, and that makes you very attractive for other people to work with you. So let's put this into action now. I've promised to give you very concrete action steps in every single episode, and this is what we will do right now. I will give you 3 action steps that you can implement right away. Consider this your homework for the next week. And if you want to invest in your music career the right way, please start with this. So the first action step is evaluate your current investments of money and time. So you can ask yourself, how much money have you spent in gear, analog and software in the last 12 months? Then you can divide this number by 12 and you will have your monthly spending in gear. Then you can move on and ask yourself critically, are you spending too much time on social media and or Netflix or Prime Video, whatever it is? If the answer is yes, then you should start implementing something called time tracking. And there's a free app that's called Clockify that lets you put in time and basically measure what are you doing at the moment with your productive hours. And this helps you get a better idea of how much time are you actually investing in which area of your life. And in order to prevent the most serious time suck to begin with, please install things like the Facebook newsfeed eradicator and experiment with the Cold Turkey app. Both of them are free, just to save you and your most productive hours of the day. The next question you should ask yourself is, are you guilty of putting out physical products that nobody is actually buying? And if this music thing is only a hobby to you and you do this out of fulfillment, then please continue. I mean, there's something like golf is probably more expensive than this hobby. But if you want to build an electronic music career, this money can probably be invested elsewhere. So be honest with yourself, ask yourself, and evaluate your current investments of money and time. Now let's move to action step number 2. You've done the analysis and now you cut these spendings and commit to maximum budgets of money and time. So I'm not saying you should completely stop buying gear. I won't be successful with this anyway. But please cut this number at least in half and commit to this as your budget for the future. You also completely cut your budget for physical products if you don't have an audience and you're not actually making money from it. And regarding time, you start setting aside distraction-free time blocks every single day during the work week. So I recommend at least 2 hours every day where you focus on either creating music or doing something else that will move your music career forward. And during these time blocks, you completely remove every distraction. You activate the cold turkey app blocker, and you prevent yourself from even accessing the distractive sites and social media and so on that you would normally go to whenever you hit a roadblock or you do something very hard. And action step number 3 is you commit to investing in your music career the right way. And that means, first of all, you set aside a yearly budget for learning new skills or improving on existing ones. And you ask yourself, can you attend a masterclass, enroll in an online course, book a one-on-one consultation, something that actually moves the needle in terms of skills for you. Moreover, you can start refining your mindset by writing a short 3 to 5 minute journal every day in order to gain more self-awareness and to find out what you actually want to work on in terms of mindset. And from there on, you can move on to buying a music biography that sounds interesting to you. And you start digging around the self-help shelf of a bigger bookstore or online, and you see what resonates with you. So just choose one area at a time where you want to improve on, and just simply don't overwhelm yourself. Go through one thing at a time, but constantly refine your mindset. And apart from that, I suggest you commit to outsourcing at least one critical area of your music career where you know you need help, but you haven't outsourced it yet. So ask yourself, what could this area be? Is it studio stuff? Is it legal work? Is it PR? Whatever it is, commit to outsourcing that, and I promise you this will boost your career significantly. So that wraps up our 3rd episode here, and I hope you found it helpful. I hope you can implement this. And as a little thank you for sticking with me, I have prepared something great for you. This is a free resource called The 7 Strategies of Highly Successful Electronic Music Producers. And you can get it at pickyourselfpodcast.com/free. And what I've done here is I've collected the things that differentiate my most successful studio clients from the ones that are constantly struggling. So check out the 7 strategies of highly successful electronic music producers at pickyourselfpodcast.com/free. And let me know if you found this helpful. I hope to see you again next time for the podcast next week. Until then, bye-bye. If you have enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. And you can find show notes to this episode in form of a detailed blog post at pickyourselfpodcast.com. Until then, see you next time.